Hello friends, welcome back to my channel. My name is Erin and this is your first time here. Welcome to Booked and Busy and welcome to my Mistborn Era 2 reading vlog. So this reading vlog is going to be equal parts a rereading vlog and equal parts a reading some of these books for the first time. So Mistborn Era 2 consists of 4 books. We have The Alloy of Law, Book 1, Shadows of Self, Book 2, The Bands of Mourning, Book 3, and finally, and most recently, The Lost Meadow, Book 4. So, The Alloy of Law and Shadows of Self, I read these both in summer or spring of 2020, and then I'm going to be reading The Bands of Mourning and The Lost Meadow for the first time. I gave both of these 5 stars on my initial read through, and I actually like them a little bit better than First Air Mistborn, which I know is a pretty unpopular opinion, and I've heard the greater Cosmere connections between these two are really gonna just rock my world. I'm also planning on reading Mistborn Secret History after I finish The Bands of Mourning before I go into The Lost Meadow, because I've heard that is the preferred reading order because I couldn't read it before because it spoils some things that we learned in Bands of Mourning. So this vlog is going to be spoiler free. I am very excited to be back in the Cosmere and to be getting new Cosmere content and being able to marathon it because I have already read Rhythm of War. And I know that there are some things in Bands of Mourning that would have impacted my reading of Rhythm of War a little bit. And I know that everyone that has read The Lost Meadow so far says that there are so many things, so many Easter eggs, so many greater Cosmere connections that I'm just really excited to see what's going on. So yeah, I'm going to be reading the 4 books in Mistborn Era 2. So let's get into it. Alright friends, so I am back with my first update. I am 200 pages into The Alloy of Law. I've been listening to this all day when I've had breaks and things like that at work. Today is Monday. I'm gonna try and get this vlog done in like 4 days. So far I'm sinking back into the world. I'm not enjoying it as much on my second read as I did on my first, but that's only because I'm further away from the world and the source material. So when I went into this, my first read, I went into it immediately after finishing Era 1, and so now it's taking me like a second or 2 longer to connect the dots. Like when they're like, oh, Harmony this, the survivor himself. The survivor's like the only one that I can that I know immediately because he was called a survivor in Era 1 too. The survivor had sent at that time. The Lady Ascendant herself, like these things, like oh, Iron Eyes, the Sliver, like it takes me a little bit longer, and it'll be like a paragraph later before I realize like who they're talking about that connects back to the original trilogy. And so whereas in my first read I was reading it and I was like, oh my god, they're talking about this person, they're talking about this person, and it just made it so much more exciting for me, although I am still really enjoying it. One of my favorite things about Era 2 is the evolution of the magic system. So I'm gonna do my best not to spoil Era 1, but so many things about Era 2 hinge on the events of Era 1. For example, even the name of the city they live in is a spoiler. So it used to be called Luthadel. For the sake of not spoiling you, I'm not going to call it by its new name, but the city has been renamed. But it used to be called Luthadel in the first series, so I'm going to just keep it at that. The city, the religion, the way of life. But my favorite thing about Era 2 versus Era 1 is the evolution of the magic system. Brandon Sanderson's like ethos going into Mistborn Era 2 and like the future eras of Mistborn was that fantasy worlds aren't static. Or they don't stagnate, they change and they evolve. And so this is 300 years after the fact of the events of Era 1, and it's like things that we as the reader know to be true because we just read them, that we saw happen in Era 1 are like myth and lore, and things that happen like in Era 2 because it's like, did this really happen? Did this even really exist? Like even the concept of there being Mistborn is the whole name of the series, but in this world it's unfathomable that people were Mistborns, that people were able to use all the alchemical metals and do all the things, because the way the magic has evolved is that in Mistborn Era 1, the main magic system was called allomancy, and with allomancy you're able to ingest metals and burn them and use their properties, but it only lasts as long as the metal is in your system, but also whichever metal you have an affinity for. If you have an affinity for one metal, it is called allomancy, and then if you have an affinity for all the metals, which is a lot more rare then and non-existent at this point now, or at least where I am in the story is non-existent, you were a Mistborn. And so in Era 1, Kelsier, the survivor, the Lord of Halfsynth, or the survivor of Halfsynth, Lord of the Mist, love him, he was a Mistborn. And then our main character Vin was also a Mistborn, and there was another magical power that was exclusive to the Terrace people, and it was called Ferrochemy. And Ferrochemy is basically where you can store things in metal. So in allomancy you burn metal to have these abilities, and then in Ferrochemy you save things in metals. So in Era 1, the main ferrochemist that we follow is Sazed, and Sazed is able to store information and knowledge in his copper mines, and that, like, if you search up copper mine online, it's like where all the knowledge about the greater cosmere is stored. So I love like that connection. So he saved information in his copper mine, and his focus was on religion. And so one of the amazing things about the world in Era 2 is that there are hundreds and hundreds of different religions, and it's like a part of the conversation, like, oh, what are you? I'm a Pathian, I'm a this, I'm a that. Like, whereas in Era 1, everyone had to follow this main religion basically, or you would die, because the Lord Ruler, like, he's like destroyed all these other cultures and made these people assimilate to the culture that he, in his own religion, where he was like the all-encompassing God, which I think is just so cool how he evolved the magic system and the world building, and so made the events of series 1 be the lore and the history and such points of conversation in Era 2. Like, they even, for example, Vin, they study Vin in schools. Like, they study Vin in school, and you have to like, girls have to have these certain things to study who she is, and like, you know, it's like the Ascendant was amazing, but I don't want to fight in the streets with the gun. Like, I don't want to do that. And we have a character in here, Miracy, who is a scholar, and she is in college, and she was researching wax and wane. I'm gonna get into the actual plot of this in a minute, but I'm approaching this vlog as if you have not read Era 1 or Era 2, and that's the only way I can keep it as spoiler free as possible for the first series. So I'm telling you things in connection to that, but I'm not gonna spoil Era 1 for you to the best of my ability, and I'm not gonna spoil Era 2 for you either. So in Era 2, people, now that they're no longer, people can no longer just be allomancers. Well, they can, but people aren't just allomancers or just ferrochemists, because over 300 years the bloodlines have mixed and things like that. People can be twin-born, and to be twin-born means that you have an allochemical power or allomantic power and a ferrochemical power. So you have abilities on both sides of the coin basically. So our main character, Waxillian Ladrian, he is able to ingest metals and then push on, so he's a coin shot, so he can ingest metals and then push on metals like that. And then he also is able to store, for example, weight and things like that, and make himself heavier or lighter to and it's come in handy already. So he's able to do those things. So that's his double power. His sidekick Wayne, what is it? Wayne, he's able to ingest what is it? Burn alloy or something like that. I can't remember the name because it's like specific combinations of the metals that are ingestible and not poisonous. He can do that, and he can create time bubbles where you can talk in these bubbles, but for everyone else time is slowing down, or like being sped, like you can speed up time for you and a certain person. And he's also able to heal himself, so he can store health in this. But the consequence of that is, like, to store health you have to be sick. to store weight, you have to be at a lighter weight and, you know, obviously have less strength and less power and these things like that. And so being able to combine these two, and what we're learning now is that our villain in this story is also twin born, but he has both sides of the coin are the same metal. And when you can use both sides of the coin for the same metal, you are able to access your abilities almost infinitely, because if you're able to store health in gold and you're able to ingest gold and do this, you can have unlimited uses essentially of the gold, and it never really runs out because you've stored it in that, and then you're using it on top of that. Like Brandon Sanderson is able to explain this in a way that I am not myself able to articulate, but it's just really, really interesting how the world and the magic and the lore have evolved in Era 2. That's one of my favorite things. Additionally, in this one, Wax has come back to the city where he was out in the roughs, let's just say the countryside, being a lawmaker. But his uncle, who was the head of his house, died, and his heir died, and so he has to come back and take up the mantle of the family. But his family is in dire straits and dire financial circumstances, so he has to marry, because he has a very like high title, but they're cash poor. So his goal is to marry someone with a lot of money, to, you know, shore up the coppers in their family. And their incomes Lord Harms and Steris and Maracy. Steris is his daughter, and she is the one who is deciding to like engage in this like marriage of convenience with Wax. And Maracy is their cousin, and she is being supported in her education until she like becomes of age by Lord Harms. So what's going on in this city is that like shipments and people are going missing. No one is really getting harmed. No one really knows how they do it. But these people that are stealing these things and kidnapping these people, they're called the Vanishers. And Wax has like turned over a new leaf. He's trying to focus on being a house lord and not on being a lawmaker, but he can't like turn off that part of his brain. So what's happening is the Vanishers are like continuously elevating the stakes in what's going on. And so now at an event where a wedding party, Steris was kidnapped. And is that a spoiler? I don't think so. As someone who's actually completed the whole book, I don't find that to be a spoiler, because that is really the motivating factor that makes Wax decide to really investigate the Vanishers and what's going on. And he's realizing that he may know who is behind the whole thing, or at least the person who is in charge of the Vanishers. But he's like, it's got to be two people working together, because if it is who I think it is, he has the brains to pull it off, but he doesn't have the capacity and the funds to make this happen. So there's got to be a man behind the mirror who is providing the funds. And so he's trying to solve this mystery, recover these people, and he's figured out like what the connection between these people are. No one has been able to figure it out. And so Wax and Wayne, along with Maracy, are solving the mystery and trying to get Steris back. Where we are right now, they kind of figured out who done it, and now they're trying to figure out where to find them and how to get the people back. So I have like 125 pages of this left, and I am going to continue listening to the audiobook, and I do plan on finishing this tonight, and I'll give you my final thoughts. It's not feeling like a 5-star read this time, but I'm not going to change my rating because of the reasons that I told you earlier why I was enjoying this reread a little bit less. But I know that as the series goes on, and like the part that I have left is going to be really exciting and really action-packed, and the greater cosmic connections start to be sprinkled in a little bit more frequently, and I'm really looking forward to that. So this has been my first update. I hope that was comprehensive, and I hope you, even if you've not read Mistborn Era 1 or Era 2, I hope that you're able to follow what's going on. So I will talk to you all when I'm done. Good morning, friends. Happy Tuesday. So I'm back with some updates. So I have finished the Alley of Law. I finished it yesterday like I thought I would. It took me 2 reading sprints and I knocked it out. I enjoyed it. I would say this was probably like a 3-star reread, but that doesn't bother me. I'm gonna still maintain my 5-star rating, simply because like this follows 300 years after the events of Mistborn Era 1. I haven't read the second and third book. I've never reread the second and third book in Mistborn Era 1. My last reread of those was in spring 2020. So 2.5 years since then. So I'm not as fresh on the details. So I'm fine with like going into this, and the thing that I enjoyed the most about it, I'm the most unfamiliar with, if that makes sense. So I still highly recommend Mistborn Era 2. I still really enjoy this. Read this in a day. It's a good time. Not only is it essential to the costume, but it's fun. So I finished this up, and at the end we start to see a little bit more of like the action scenes and the way that Brandon Sanderson like tells you about this thing over here and then goes over there to like surprise you with something different. And we, at the end of this, we start to see more rumblings and involvement of people like Harmony and Iron Eyes. And it's like, if you haven't read Era 1, that means nothing to you. But if you have read Era 1, it's more intriguing, because it's like, how and or why is this happening and what's going on with this. So I really enjoyed my reread. I'm happy that I am doing this all in one go. And so I'm now 50% of the way, probably a little more than 50%, because I'm 206 pages into Shadows of Self, and it's 380 pages. So I'm not giving as frequent updates on these first two, because I've already read them and I know what's going to happen. As soon as I get started in the story, like the rest of the story comes back to me. So there'll probably be more updates on Bands of Mourning, The Lost Metal, and Mistborn Secret History, simply because I just don't want to spend too much time on what I already know. And it's easy to not spoil these because I don't know what's going to happen. So even if I was making predictions 100 pages in the Bands of Mourning, I don't know what's going to happen. So I could be, you know, completely off base. But where I am in this one, there's a 1-year time jump from the end of the Alley of Law, and Wax has been given this like forbearance and position, like the authority to investigate things that are going on at his level of interest in the city. And he uses that often when he thinks that things are going on that relate to the people that were funding the mission that happened in the first book, funding the Vanishers. He has since figured out at least one person that is involved with their overall plotting, and he's after them and trying to figure out what the bigger conspiracy is and who are the players involved. And so at the center of this one is the governor and his brother, because there are rumors circulating that the governor and his brother are corrupt, and that the brother often sells the governor's vote, or, you know, his position to the highest party. And there's a mystery surrounding how the brother died, because for all intents and purposes, no one would have been able to access him due to the level of security and the things that he had. And so Wax is convinced that the people who did it had to have known him and to be in on it, and that there's this greater plot to kill the governor. And he thinks that this is an isolated situation, and that it's somehow connected to the greater plot that we saw in book 1 with the Vanishers and the people that were working with them to destabilize the government, steal these materials, kidnapping these women, etc. So we also are getting more character development for Wayne. We're seeing more of his backstory. We're getting more of a like emotional connection with him, because we found out a little bit about this penance that he pays for himself, about things that he's done in his past, and we get to see how that impacts him in the story, and we get to see that actually happen, as well as now Marcy has like become like the third amigo basically, and she is now working with the law enforcement, and she often ends up working with Wax and Wayne to like solve these things. So she's in the mix in a more official capacity. So still enjoying this one. This reread, like I said, is shaping up to be like another 3-star reread, but again, I'm gonna stick with my 5-star rating because I'm enjoying it so much and it's such an easy listen. So I do plan on finishing that today and starting Bands of Mourning today. So I will give you my final thoughts on this when I finish. Friends, I'm back with an update. At some point I'm gonna leave the library when I do these updates, but my camera and chair and lights are already set up in here, so it's like more effort to just move them somewhere else for the sake of having a different angle. I did move you to this side so you can see like my messy desk in the background, but let's get into it. So I finished Shadows of Self earlier today. In this one, I remembered a little bit less some of the twists at the end, so I was surprised about the reveals, and specifically with the involvement of the Kandra. And I like how the mythological creatures and beings of Era 1 are being reintroduced, and their involvement in Era 2. So this one, we see a lot more involvement from Harmony, and mainly Harmony, but like Harmony and the Kandra are large parts of what's going on in here. And we see Miracy with having a lot more agency and questioning whether or not her position and her rank as like lieutenant and all that, like, was it based on her own merit, or is it based on her proximity to and connection with Wax? Which is a very valid question, but I think you can't really divorce one from the other, because working with him brought you to prominence. Yes, you have all this experience, and well, not experience, but yes, you have some experience and you have all this education, but these things are also true as well, that you have this connection with a very important person. So this, like I said, is probably another 3-star reread. Although I'll probably make like a 3.5 star, because I enjoy like getting to know Wayne a little bit more, and spending time with the Terrace people, because I really enjoy them as their like society and how things work. But this is like ground that had already tread, so I was already aware of everything that had gone on here. And so now I have started the Bands of Mourning. I'm not far into it, like I said, with this one, and the Lost Metal updates will probably be a little more frequent because I don't know what's going on. So I just finished part 1, and that is like 90 pages in. And so Bands of Mourning starts 6 months after the concluding events of Shadows of Self. And so Shadows of Self also saw, like, in the society, like a cultural reset to a degree, revolution, a reckoning of like the authority. And that's a theme that was true in Mistborn Era 1. So I think that's something that's going to be true maybe of the entire Mistborn series, is about people evolving and holding like their leaders and leadership accountable and things like that. And we are told that, like, as a society, things have become were made so easy for them by Harmony that they don't progress, or they haven't progressed nearly as much as they should have, because they lack curiosity, because their life is so comfortable. So Bands of Mourning, like I said, picks up 6 months after the end of book 1, and we find Wax and Steris are like trying to get married, and Wayne is constantly sabotaging them. We as the reader know that that's what's happening, and Wayne believes that Wax knows. He's just in denial, because it's like he doesn't really want to marry Steris either. And so we see a couple of different characters like reckoning like with their relationships and moving on and becoming new people. But then they are tasked with finding these mythical bands of mourning. And if you don't know what the bands of mourning are, the bands of mourning are the metal mines and bracers that were worn by the Lord Ruler and are alleged to have been lost to history. Someone has, let's read the synopsis together. How about that? Let's see what the synopsis tells us. The bands of mourning, yep, there we go. The Bands of Mourning, mythological bracers worn centuries ago by the Lord Ruler. Okay, so I'm not spoiling anything. I didn't think I was, but just checking. Until they were ripped from his body by the Ascendant Warrior, bringing about his death. The bands were said to hold incredible power, but of course everyone knows they were lost long ago to the mist of time. Oh, can we focus? There we go. Someone just found them. In the blank basin, trouble is brewing. Labor disputes are only the beginning. A greater division has grown between the capital and the other cities of the basin. Cities blank claims to lead, while their citizens cry oppression. Amid all of this, word comes to Waxilium Ladrian that the legendary Bands of Mourning may have been located by a Kandra scholar. These weapons could sow destruction and upend the balance of power in the basin. Wax wants nothing to do with the Bands of Mourning. Chasing mist isn't a job for a lawman, and he has deeper and more pressing issues to deal with, wounds that cut into his very soul. For what do you do when you feel that the god himself has lied to you? A clash of ancient legends, political turmoil, and a crisis of faith ignite the explosive third volume in the Wax and Wayne novels. What it reveals will transform everything you thought you knew about the Mistborn world. There's always another secret. Okay, so I'm on the right path. Basically, the first 90 pages really just sets up the synopsis. And it seems like it's going to be a side quest. because they're leaving the city, going somewhere else. But then it's like what they're gonna discover on this journey, and maybe the bands of mourning themselves will change the face of the Mistborn world as we know it, because they are game changers, power dynamic shifters. And we also see, even in the end of book 2, that the Vanishers and like the secret body behind them are still very active and still have a role to play in cultivating strife and things in the city. And we're also trying to see like what is their larger motive, what are they trying to accomplish. Not Wayne, but Wax has a theory, but he's like, how do these pieces come together? So we're gonna see the gang, but Steris is gonna go on this mission too. And I think that this is actually Steris on the cover. I think this is Steris, and then this is Miracy. So it's like, okay, is Steris gonna play a larger role? Because like Steris was mainly absent in book 1 because, you know, she had been kidnapped. And then in book 2, we only saw her little bits and pieces because the majority of book 2 happens in about like 48 hours, I want to say. So she just wasn't around with the investigating and all those things that were happening. But it was because she's on the cover, I would assume that she's going to play a much larger role in this, because they're like, well, why would you and Wayne go somewhere with my cousin and I'm not there? Like, for propriety's sake, I need to go too. And as a synopsis like alluded to, well, not alluded to but mentioned, Wax has had essentially a falling out with Harmony because he no longer feels like he can trust him. And so like, you know, religion is like a big theme in this series, always has been. And so we're seeing someone who had so much faith, and now their faith has been shaken, the foundation of that faith, and he's trying to figure out who to trust and what to believe and what to lean on, when like his faith has kind of been that bedrock for him. But now his faith is what he doesn't know that he can trust, but he also knows that the person behind his faith is the person he feels like is manipulating him in a way. So enjoying this so far. I'm intrigued to see what's going on. I'm excited because this is the first new Cosmere thing that I've really read in like a year. So I'm excited to see what the connections are, especially because I've already read Rhythm of War. So I know that in here there are some things that connect to Rhythm of War, and it's like, can I put them together when Rhythm of War isn't as fresh in my mind because it's been over a year. So I'm excited to read that. It's like almost 7 p.m. So I am going to probably do some more reading tonight, but I probably won't talk to you guys until in the morning and or tomorrow, maybe when I'm about like 50% of the way through, because I think right now I'm like 15 or 20. But if something major happens, then I'll come back and update you all. But there won't be any more updates from this sweater because I'm going to retire it for the day. Bye. Friends, we are long overdue for an update, so I'm going to try to keep this thorough but brief. I finished The Bands of Mourning yesterday, and I'm closing it out at like a 3.5 4-star. This book really brought the Sanderlanche back. If you're watching this video, I assume that you're pretty familiar with Sanderson, but if for whatever reason you aren't, the last 20 to 30% of his books are usually quite explosive. Things just build and build and build and get larger and larger and larger. It snowballs to an extreme amount and then it just like explodes. And the reveals in here, like, there's something that's happening in here and you're like, is it this person or is it this person? And it could easily be either of the two people, but the characters believe and assume that it is one person, so you as a reader kind of go along with them. I'm just like, how, Sway? How? Say it ain't so. And even like if you like me have read these in a different order, whether you've already read Rhythm of War, you'll already know the answer to this, but the text gives you such strong evidence to the other side that it's like, is it that? Really? How could this have happened? And then like the last final line of this, you're just like, what? I can't believe people read this in 2016 and had to wait until 2022 to get some answers. That's crazy on Brandon. Because let him tell it in the like postscript, Lost Meadow was supposed to come out after Oathbringer, but it turns out it came out after Rhythm of War. 2 years after Rhythm of War. So the girlies have been waiting for a long time. So I enjoyed this. It's probably, if I'm basing it on this reread, this is my favorite. But if I'm basing it on my original experience, this is probably my least favorite. And like I said, throughout this whole process is because like reading Era 2 so close to Era 1 for me really heightened my enjoyment. For a lot of people, I think reading them close together like brought their enjoyment down because of how different they are. But I appreciate the project of Mistborn, and every time Sanderson speaks about it in like the interviews for these, or like when I was listening to Arcanum Unbounded, he talks about how this is a great experiment for him over the course of his career, and how Mistborn as a series, or the Mistborn saga along with Stormlight, is what he wants to work on for his entire career. And the next series in the Mistborn world, the next era is going to be a contemporary setting, and then the one after that is going to be like a futuristic type of setting. And I'm just like, I'm so intrigued to see what Brandon Sanderson would do with that. Also, when it's like we have books upon books and hundreds of years of lore already built in, and how do the events of the previous series then impact the other series? What characters are still relevant? The things that we know to be true and be realities here, how do they evolve, and how do they become a part of the lore of these future worlds? And I just think that's really, really interesting. So I enjoyed this. Gave it 3.54 stars, and then I read Mistborn Secret History. I have Arcanum Unbounded over there, but we don't need to pick that up. I read Mistborn Secret History and I really enjoyed it. I gave that one 4 stars. It's a novella. It's about 170 pages, and it is the knowledge. I can't say it's essentially anything about that because it's very, very spoilery. So you can, if you want to know when you can read it, you can read it after you've read the original Mistborn trilogy, but it's best if you read it after Bands of Mourning, because that's when it was written after, because the ending of Bands of Mourning connects to Mistborn Secret History. I did really enjoy seeing all the things that were happening in Mistborn Secret History, and honestly, I feel like, you know, people are always talking about like the Mistborn adaptation, things like that. Like, I think a whole spin-off show, you know how like you had like Vampire Diaries in the original, a whole spin-off show could be created just based on Mistborn Secret History, and like I could see at least like 3 or 4 seasons of a show just in those 171 pages, just like in the content that's there. So much to explore in that area, and I'm really excited for like the future of the Cosmere when we start to see like screen adaptations. So now I am reading The Lost Metal. So I just finished part 1. And also, let me say, I love these little sections of the broadsheets. I don't know if this is included in the other one, but like these illustrations, and like, because I'm listening to the audiobook, these illustrations and all that, like I really enjoy. That's such a nice touch, and I think that that's something that Sanderson and Dragonsteel always do. Like, their books are really high quality. There are lots of interior art, things like that. Like, it's always an experience when you're reading a book in the Cosmere. So Lost Metal, there's a 6-year time jump from the events of the Bands of Mourning, and I appreciate how the story has evolved. I appreciate seeing one specific character and like this next stage of life and how that's going, and seeing how characters like Mercy and Wayne have their own identities. Like, you know, Wax and Wayne were a duo in the beginning, and then Mercy kind of joined their group, and they were like the 3 Musketeers, whatever. But as the story and the series has progressed, each of them, specifically Wayne and Mercy, have like been developed into their own people. Also with Steris. And they've gotten more character development to make them more rounded and not just like the punchy sidekick. And I'm really intrigued by like the actions of the set, because it's always seeming like the set are like 2 and 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 steps ahead of the gang. And in this one, we're already seeing the greater Cosmere connections in just this first 140 pages. And also you're seeing the fallibility of gods and what conflict looks like at the shard level. And like, I feel like from having read Rhythm of War and Oathbringer, I think we learned a lot more about the shards in those 2 books, and now seeing different shards in this system, because in the Cosmere there are these different, let's just say, you know, like the Milky Way and all these other things like that. It's like that. I don't even think that made sense. But you have like the planets in this specific system. So the planet that Mistborn takes place on is in the Scadrial system, and then the planet where Stormlight takes on, that planet is called Roshar, and that's in a different system. And so these shards exist in these different systems because they are all these parts of creation and divinity that splintered and became planetary bodies and things like that. And that's not the whole of it, but I'm just trying to give you enough so you can understand to a degree. And so seeing how these various shards and these pieces of infinity and pieces of divinity interact with one another, and how there is not even equitable at that level, and seeing this one character's growth over the series. And like there's this moment, like there's some little sweet moments at the beginning. I'm just like, oh, this is a thing that I love in books, seeing characters go from being bachelors to being in relationships to being you know, family men, and to being like, I like seeing the progression of a character throughout the story. And that's also something I appreciate about time jumps, is because we watch how the decisions that a character has made impact their mental state and the decisions that they make further on, rather than just in the moment. Like, because all the action can take place in the moment, but how do you live with the repercussions of the things that you've done? And we're also seeing like a larger political situation, not just in the city but in the surrounding areas as well, and that's playing a large part in like the politics of this world. I'm enjoying this one. I'm definitely reading this one a lot more carefully because I want to spot the greater cosmic connections and see like how this connects to Rhythm of War. But I know with Brandon Sanderson, like right now it might be a little crumb or two, but then when I get to like this section, that's when things are really going to pick up, and my mind is going to be blown and my jaw is going to be on the floor. So I'm having a good time with this one. I'll definitely give you an update 50%. I don't think much was happening at the beginning of the Bands of Morning, to be honest with you. To have come back and give you another update, things really start progressing like towards the latter half of that book. Definitely felt like a side quest, but like it was a side quest, but it was a large and important reason, especially for the greater world. And another thing that I appreciate is seeing how religion evolves and how people's faith waxes and wanes over time. And like there's this line that I'm gonna give you the quote, but without context it doesn't anything, but like this line just hit me because it's like, will you be my sword again, Waxilium? And like, ooh, like if you knew how long it took to get to that moment and like the things behind it, it just really hit different. It really hit different. And I think that a lot of people, especially if you're religious, I think that in the Cosmere, the gods, to a degree, or at least to our special people, are a lot more accessible to them than people, humans on earth. Obviously our gods are accessible to us, but seeing these candid conversations that people have with their gods, and whether they think they're listening or not, and how those things play a part in the politics and in the world order, is very interesting. And I like it. I like that it's showing that you can also be having a negative relationship with your faith, and where your faith isn't as strong, and how that affects your life and the life of like other people around you. So I'm having a fabulous time. I'm gonna keep reading, and I will talk to you all in the morning. I'm back, still in the same angle. I've accepted that this vlog is just gonna take place in this one room. I hope you're okay. Well, it's already happened, so you're gonna have to be. I did a good chunk of reading today while I was at work. So when we talked last night, I didn't end up reading anymore last night, but when we talked last night, I was on page one, like right on 150, and I'm now on page 350. So I read a good chunk of that, and now I'm in chapter 53, and I have about 150 pages left. And so I know that I'm deep into the Sanderlanche, and like a lot has happened, but we're really about to get into like the final sequence, because this is the finale of the series, so like a lot is gonna happen. I have been listening to this throughout the day and like reading when I had time, and so that's how I kind of got those 200 pages read. And because I wasn't able to vlog while I was out, I have like tweeted through some of my updates. So I'm just gonna read out some of these and like give you the context behind that situation. Even Angela was like, I'm really having a good time reliving some of these moments through your tweets. So there's this moment, like a Here Come the Cavalry moment. Like if you see Avengers, is it Endgame or Infinity War, where like the moment when Thor comes through, like everybody's fighting and they're struggling, and Thor comes in and he just starts whipping and dipping and like swinging a hammer, and then he swings it to Cap, and like that whole moment, you know, like if you saw it in theaters, that moment, like the good guys were losing, and then he came in and everybody just had this, you know, resurgence, and you know, he won the day. It was like that. So there's also this moment, I think I mentioned this earlier this morning or last night, when there was a moment between Harmony and Wax, and it was like, will you be my sword again, Waxilium? That moment, just that scene, it really did something to me, okay? But then there was a Here Come the Cavalry moment, because shortly after there's this battle that's happening, the good guys are losing, and they're like, we need the hero, but he's retired, he's doing this, he's doing that, like he's not coming. And you know who pulls up? Waxilium Ladrian. Oh, and it's just like, oh yeah, I'm in the building. I'm not too old. Y'all thought I hung the dusters up. Y'all thought I hung the Miss Cloak up, but here I am, baby. And Wax is just like, oh, I got my metal mines. I got this. I got that. I got vindication, and I've got like this other gun, and it's like, just. And he's doing this and he's doing that. It's like, I'm not worried about this. And they're shooting across the sky and coin shot this. And oh, I lifted my metal mines and I have increased my weight. It was just a really good scene. Really enjoyed that moment. It did a lot for me. I was screaming internally and externally. And then there's this other moment where the good guys are in trouble. The good guys are in trouble with the law, okay? And Death walks in. They were like, how are we gonna get out of this? And they're like, Harmony says he's sending us some help, and it should be here right about now. Next thing you know, old Iron Eyes walk in the building. Everybody shook. You could hear a pin drop in there. He's like, listen, do you want to play with me today? Do you want to play with Death himself today? Everybody was like, nah. And it was like, my compatriots gotta go. And it was just, I'm not doing justice to the moment, but whew, it was a good time. It was a good time. And then, okay, some of these reveals are happening, some of these little connections, and we're interacting with another character, and I was like, hold on, like we got little bits and pieces, and found out a little something at the end of the Bands of Mourning. And now in the Lost Metal, I'm like, what? And then I was like, hold on, this organization that I'm familiar with from Roshar, this like, not criminal, but this, you know, Black Order secret group that was working not necessarily to our best interests on Roshar, they're connected to Scadrial? And I'm like, does this whole organization answer to him? Brandon, I need some more explanation. I know he's tired of being on this planet, but baby, I need some more explanation. And that's just, those have been my reactions for the last 200 pages, like the big moments where I'm just like, huh? And then there like continues to be a lot more depth that we're getting to Wayne. And I'm honestly concerned for my baby. He's like, listen, I'm getting old. And he's like, Wax, you're 39. Like, of course things are going to be a little different. He's like, no, you infected me. You've been talking about getting old and sitting down, and now it's passing on to me. And so I'm young and spry, and like there are these moments where like Wayne just says these really like poignant things, and you know, things are concerning. And then like the situation with Harmony and the way that godhood works, I learned this in Mistborn era 1. That was my first time reading Brandon Sanderson. I love the way that he plays with these larger than life godlike things and concepts. It's like when you think that gods are all powerful and all knowing, but you know, if there are multiple gods, like, does their power, are they all on the same level? What things can counteract the power of a god? How can you kill the unkillable? Just because you think someone is bad, like, they are multifaceted. And it got to a point where it's like, especially in era 1, like, I feel like by the end of the series, to a degree, you almost sympathize with the Lord Ruler, and you like really understood him in a much deeper way. And it's like he wasn't just the bad guy. Like, there was more to it. He was bad, yes, but it was a lot more that was going on, that when you learn some of it, it's like, okay, maybe things aren't at quite what they seem. So I'm really, really enjoying my read of this. I'm probably going to come back to you with my final thoughts. But I'm having a fabulous time. I will say, as much as I like the characters in Era 2, and as much as I enjoy learning about the greater Cosmere, the actual plot in Era 2 doesn't do much for me. I don't really care about the, let me see, I don't care about the human factors. I care about the larger factors in this, because, like, for example, in Stormlight Archive, like, there are the human things going on, the human conflicts, whether they are influenced by the gods or not. There are the human conflicts and the human things that are interacting with each other and causing problems, and things that we're trying to, you know, solve and do. And then there's this godly element and how those things interact with one another, how the gods or these powerful beings influence things in their interactions. And, like, I enjoy the plot of that, and I enjoy the gods' role in all that. And while I'm always intrigued by the actions of gods, I don't really care for the plot. Like, it's been the same big bad. We've just, like, pulled back layers in each book about who they are, what their goals are, and this long plan. And, like, we're getting to see some things in Lost Meadow that we were wondering as to the reason why in Alloy of Law, and we're just now, like, we thought we knew what they were doing, but we really didn't know. And when you think about it, it's like, duh, that couldn't have been it, because that would have been a really, really long-term thing. And while sure, we could do that, but the more sinister short-term plan is much more aligned with their goals. And when you find that out, it's like, okay, clearly Brandon Sanderson has always, like, known where this was going, and you can see the connections that go back to the first book. But it's like, overall, I guess the plot seems so small scale. I think that's what it is. I figured it out. Like, the plot in Stormlight is grand and epic, and I feel like the plot in Era 1 is really grand and epic, with the people in Luthadel, with the shards, with all that. Like, like, overthrowing this empire feels really epic. And I think that's the difference between this. Like, while the greater motives and, like, the underlying things, when you get to the root in itself is epic, the, like, interplay between these various elements doesn't really do much for me. So I think that's the downfall of this series for me. And while, even though I enjoy, in some regards, I enjoy it more, my overall, like, lasting impact is going to be lessened because I'm not really that invested in the plot. But I love the world, really enjoy the characters, and of course I appreciate the greater cosmic connection. I always just like reading Brandon Sanderson. So that's where I am. I'm going to finish this up, and then we're going to come back and wrap up this vlog. Friends, I am back to close out the vlog. I finished The Lost Meadow, and I gave myself like a day to really sit and marinate on my thoughts. The ending of this really made me cry. Like, it was one of those moments where I was like, is what I think is about to happen really what's about to happen? And then it happened, and I just sobbed. I sobbed. I was just like, and then there's a series of epilogues, and they were so sweet and tied up some things, and also, like, kind of gave you what the next era of Mistborn was gonna look like and why it was gonna look that way. And I think in my last, like, update, I kind of wrapped up my thoughts on the entire series. So while I do really enjoy Era 2, I think for me the characters and the greater cosmic connections are my favorite part of this story. The plot isn't one that particularly moved me, but I think when we finally get to like the Lost Meadow, we really see why this kind of had to be the plot, because this is going to be the thing that leads us into the next generation. Because Brandon Sanderson said that he wanted the next generation to be like modern with computers and things like that, and then the final like Mistborn saga or Mistborn era being Era 4 being like futuristic sci-fi. And when you go from like medieval times to this like industrial revolution where we have guns, we have the invention of cars, we have like photos and motion pictures, like this place in history, and it's like, okay, well, the reason we need to get to the next step, it could only be this, if this makes sense. Like the logic behind why we got to that, like I feel like I got a peek inside Brandon Sanderson's head and why he did things the way that he did, because there had to be a compelling reason, to continue on this narrative, but also to go to the next level of advancement, and the reasonings for this advancement and why this advancement had not happened yet, because like we also see the invention of the radio and things like that. Like you just see so much advancement and so much technological growth here, but it's like not nearly as much as you should have, because Harmony has made life so simple and so easy for them, I guess, almost in like reparations for how the Lord Ruler stunted growth and during his tenure as, you know, having the final empire. So I really appreciate what Brandon Sanderson did here. I think it was masterfully done and well plotted out, and like I feel like, especially because I reread the first two, I feel like even if I was to go back and reread it now, I would see even more like how this greater plot was laid out from book one, like the initial things, and some of that is addressed in this book. It's like, oh, you thought this is what was going on and you thought this was the reason, but what really was going on was this. And so like there was definitely some full circle moments that I really appreciated. Overall, I would say Era 2 is like a 4-star series for me. I really enjoyed it. I'm happy to have read it, and I'm happy that I have like this one like cumulative experience where I read all of this in a week, because I started book 1 on Monday, finished book 4 on Friday, but I also read Mistborn Secret History in between that. So like 5 books in 5 days. I'm really pleased with how it has turned out. I hope you all have enjoyed this video. I hope that if you have read Mistborn Era 2, that this was fun to like come to and like connect the dots with. And I hope that if you have not read Mistborn, this has like encouraged you to pick it up and see like what all the fuss is about. If you have made it to the end of this video, leave a hat emoji, and if you know, you know. And thank you for watching this video, and I hope you continue to stay tuned and that you're enjoying Vlogmas. Bye.